What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends walks onto a talk show, expecting an easy, friendly chat, only to be met with thinly veiled hostility from the very host meant to welcome him? In less than 30 seconds, a single question would turn Tamron Hall from cheerful interviewer into public villain, triggering a walk-off no one saw coming. Samuel L. Jackson had done this 1,000 times before. He knew the rhythm. You arrive, you sit, you talk about your latest project, maybe throw in a joke or two, and everyone leaves smiling. That's the dance. That's how it always goes. So when he stepped onto the Tamron Hall Show stage that afternoon, he had no reason to expect anything different. The audience cheered as he made his way to the guest chair. Tamron rose from behind her desk, smiling brightly, her hand extended. Samuel shook it with that trademark grin, then settled comfortably into his seat. "Welcome, welcome," Tamron beamed, her voice upbeat. "We're thrilled to have you with us today." "Glad to be here," Samuel replied with his calm warmth. "Thanks for having me." Everything began smoothly enough. They chatted about his newest movie, a tense thriller that had just hit theaters. Samuel spoke with passion about the role, a detective chasing a serial killer. He discussed the director's vision, his preparation, and the long hours of study he'd put in to bring authenticity to the part. Tamron nodded, appearing engaged. "This character seems quite different from many you've played before," she said. "How did you approach getting inside his head?" Samuel launched into an articulate, thoughtful response, explaining how he'd shadowed police officers, read psychology texts, and immersed himself in real-life case studies. It was the kind of answer that showed total professionalism and dedication. But something about Tamron's expression began to shift. Her polite smile lingered, yet her eyes told a different story, colder, sharper. Samuel couldn't quite name it, but the energy in the room subtly changed. "That's fascinating," Tamron said when he finished, though her tone had cooled. Then she added, "You know, speaking of preparation, there's something I've been seeing online that I'd like to ask about." Samuel raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh, what's that?" "Well," she said, her voice taking on a hint of edge, "there are people out there questioning whether you're still relevant in today's Hollywood, whether maybe your time has passed." The audience fell silent. Samuel's smile faded. He straightened in his chair, his expression tightening. "Sorry, come again?" he asked evenly. "I mean," Tamron continued casually, "you've been in the industry for a long time. Some critics say maybe you're holding on to roles that should go to younger actors, fresher faces. What do you say to that?" For a moment, Samuel just stared, processing the words. This wasn't curiosity, it was an ambush. "Fresher faces?" he repeated slowly. "Are you asking if I think I'm too old to act?" "Not too old," Tamron replied quickly, waving her hand dismissively, as if to soften the jab. "Just, maybe not quite as in demand as you used to be. I mean, when was your last big hit, the kind everyone was talking about?" Murmurs rippled through the audience. This was not the conversation they'd expected. Samuel's jaw tightened. He took a breath before answering, his voice steady. "I think my work speaks for itself," he said. "I've been lucky enough to enjoy a career spanning decades, and I'm grateful for every opportunity that comes my way." Tamron nodded, but pressed further. "Sure, but you have to admit, Hollywood's changed. There's so much new talent. Don't you think it's a little selfish to keep taking roles when you could step aside and let someone else have a shot?" That word, selfish, hung in the air like a slap. Samuel's eyes narrowed. Selfish? He echoed. Well, yeah, Tamron said lightly, leaning back in her chair. You've had your moment in the spotlight. You've made your money. Why not let the next generation shine? Gasps fluttered through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, whispering. What had started as friendly chatter had turned uncomfortably tense. Let me get this straight, Samuel said quietly, his tone measured. You invited me here, to your show, to tell me I should stop acting? I'm just saying what people are thinking, Tamron replied with a shrug. It's not personal. It's just the reality of the business. The reality of the business, Samuel repeated, shaking his head slowly. And what exactly makes you the expert on that? Have you spent 40 years building a career from the ground up? Have you worked your way from nothing to become one of the most recognizable faces in film? Tamron's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. I'm a journalist, she said stiffly. It's my job to ask tough questions. Tough questions? Samuel's voice rose slightly, controlled, but unmistakably sharper now. There's a difference between tough questions and disrespect. You didn't invite me for a conversation. You brought me here to humiliate me. That's not true, Tamron insisted, her confidence wavering. I'm just trying to have an honest discussion. Honest? Samuel laughed under his breath, bitterly. There's nothing honest about blindsiding someone on live TV. Tamron's smile stiffened. They're not accusations, she said defensively. I'm just asking legitimate questions about your career path. Samuel leaned forward slightly, his expression unwavering. My career path, he said, voice low but steady, is none of your damn business. And even if it were, you don't get to sit there and tell me I'm too old or irrelevant. You don't have that right. The entire atmosphere in the studio shifted. The once lively audience sat frozen, wide-eyed. The crew behind the cameras glanced nervously at one another, unsure if they should cut or keep filming. Tamron tried to laugh it off. I think you're overreacting, she said lightly, though her voice trembled. I didn't mean any offense. Samuel gave a short, sharp laugh, one with no humor at all. You didn't mean offense, he said, leaning back. Then how exactly was I supposed to take that? You practically called me irrelevant and selfish on my own time. I was just presenting a point of view, Tamron replied, forcing composure. There are opinions out there, public discussions about the generational shift in Hollywood. A point of view, Samuel repeated coldly. You know what? I don't care whose view it is. The fact that you thought this, right here, on your show, was the place to bring that up says everything I need to know about your intentions. Tamron's eyes hardened. My intention, she said, is to create compelling television. Samuel laughed again, louder this time, but still void of amusement. Compelling television, he said. So that's what you call trying to tear someone down for ratings? No one's trying to tear anyone down, Tamron said quickly, her tone growing defensive again. You're being incredibly sensitive right now. Defensive? Samuel's eyes locked on hers, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You disrespected me, my work, and every actor who spent a lifetime building their career. And now you want to make me the problem for reacting to it? Tamron crossed her arms. I think you need to calm down, she said flatly. The audience gasped. That phrase, those 3 words, landed like a grenade. Samuel's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? He said slowly. You're getting very aggressive, Tamron continued, digging herself deeper. I'm just trying to have a civil conversation. There's nothing civil about what you've been doing, Samuel said sharply. And telling me to calm down? That's the oldest trick in the book. You say something offensive, then act like the other person's crazy for responding. No one in the audience dared make a sound now. Some sat with their hands covering their mouths. Others simply stared in disbelief. Tamron tried again, her voice shaking slightly now. I really think you're misinterpreting my questions. I'm not misinterpreting anything, Samuel replied firmly. You made yourself perfectly clear. You think I'm washed up. You think I should step aside. You think I'm somehow taking opportunities away from younger talent. That's not what I said, Tamron argued. That's exactly what you said, Samuel shot back. Maybe not word for word, but that's the message. And you know the worst part? You don't even have the courage to own it. You hide behind this excuse of tough journalism, like that gives you permission to be cruel. Tamron opened her mouth to respond, but Samuel raised his hand, stopping her cold. No, he said firmly, I'm not done. You want to know what's really selfish, Tamron? It's bringing someone onto your show under the pretense of promoting their work, then using that platform to tear them down. That's not journalism. That's manipulation. Tamron looked rattled now, her confidence visibly cracking. I think you're being unfair, she said weakly. Samuel shook his head. You don't get to talk to me about fair, he said quietly, his voice steady but full of conviction. You crossed a line today, a big one. For several long seconds, no one moved. The studio was heavy with silence, thick, tense, almost suffocating. Samuel looked at her, then turned his gaze toward the audience, before speaking again. You know what? He said finally. I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly doesn't respect me or the work I've done. He stood up. The sudden motion made Tamron flinch slightly. Wait, where are you going? She asked, her voice rising in panic. I'm leaving, Samuel said simply. This interview's over. You can't just walk out. We're still filming, Tamron said, standing too, desperation creeping into her voice. Watch me, Samuel replied, unhooking his microphone from his jacket. Please, sit down, Tamron pleaded, trying to regain control. Let's talk this through. There's nothing to talk about, Samuel said, dropping the mic onto the chair beside him. You said what you wanted to say. Now I'm doing what I need to do. But we still have 10 minutes left, Tamron said, her tone almost pleading now. What am I supposed to do with 10 minutes of dead air? Samuel paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to her one final time. That's your problem, he said quietly. Maybe you can use that time to think about how to treat your guests with respect. A ripple of gasps swept through the audience. Then, unexpectedly, applause. At first, hesitant claps. Then, louder. Until the entire studio was clapping as Samuel walked toward the exit. Samuel, wait, Tamron called out. But he didn't even look back. The studio doors opened, and Samuel L. Jackson walked straight through them, leaving Tamron Hall standing alone in front of her cameras, speechless. The audience was still clapping, some on their feet. The crew stood frozen, unsure whether to cut or keep rolling. Tamron looked out toward the cameras, then back at her producers off stage. Her face was red, her expression a mix of anger and humiliation. She had lost control of her tone, her guest, and her entire show. Well, she said finally, forcing a nervous laugh that was unexpected. But no one was buying it. The damage was done. In less than 15 minutes, she had managed to turn a celebrated Hollywood guest into a public incident, one that would soon explode across every social platform in existence.